Hi, I'm Rick Dancer. Welcome to the Water Cooler. We're talking about the Lane County proposed budget for 2012. And joining me now is Sheriff Tom Turner and District Attorney Alex Gardner. Thanks for being here, you guys. Sheriff, we'll start with you. $16 million budget cuts and $8 million from the general fund comes from your budget. And then there's more.
Right. It's it kind of depends on the day, as you've seen. This is a pretty flexible deal. So we started out 13.5 and we're working our way up. So the Sheriff's Office of the discretionary general fund is about 44%. So what happens periodically is you'll hear the Sheriff's Office, the DA's office, and DYS mixed together for like a 65 or 70% mark that sometimes they use. But either way, ultimately what it means to us is certainly in the $7 million range and plus, just out of the discretionary general fund to the Sheriff's Office. In addition, this next coming year, we're going to reduce the use of the road fund by $2 million. What that means is that $850,000 is all that's left to actually run patrol out of that road fund that we used. And so it's a $2 million deficit also. And then we have a $1 million reduction in revenues. And that's kind of that belt tightening that so many businesses do. And so what's happening is ultimately people aren't buying as many services from us, and that's another $1 million. On top of that, I have another piece that I'm a little worried about, and that is there's some inflationary pieces here that we haven't taken into account. All of those dollars that we're talking about are in today's dollars. They're not in a year from now dollars. And that can make a big difference when you're starting to look at your budget, sometimes a couple $1 million. And that concerns me a great deal also because we haven't taken that into account. This is today's dollars. This is what we think the cut's going to be. So we're winding up having to make some pretty severe adjustments in order to make into the next fiscal year by July 1st.
How many cuts and who's cut out of this proposal?
Ultimately, we're looking at about 80 cuts. 40 of those will be deputy sheriffs. 40 of those will be support staff. Probably the most devastating piece is it'll reduce patrol down to 6 deputy sheriffs that are actually patrolling a 4,600 square mile county. And then, not that that's not bad enough, then you're going to get to the jail. And the jail is going to be reduced to 131 beds. That'll put us at about 120 beds left, which we've used this number for years. We've used this, there's this many beds, there's that many beds. What it means is that we'll probably be the lowest in the country for number of beds per 1,000. Lane County is 350,000 people. So for that population, you should have at least 1,000 jail beds. We'll have about 120. So we'll have 0.33 jail beds per 1,000. It isn't even statistically imaginable. So if you compare just Oregon, just the Oregon counties, we're looking at, this is all the other jails in Oregon. You're looking at 1.78 beds. So quite a bit higher. And then if you're looking at a national average, you're at 2.7. So
would it help if in Lane County?
It's not no way to hold.
If we joined the police departments, if you came up with some kind of service district with, I've heard people talk about this, the Springfield Police Department, Eugene Police Department, Lane County Sheriff, bring everybody together with that.
Well, one of the things that's very difficult for a metro plan, because we've all talked about it. All the departments have talked about it. We spent a lot of time trying to analyze it and figure out whether it would work. One of the problems is Lane County is so big. If you had a smaller geographical area, you could portray you could provide the resources for a much lower dollar figure. When you add 4,600 square miles, you're trying to provide that same service and you're spreading it out over too much area. All of a sudden, there's no way to recover your costs out of it, particularly when you have a partner like Lane County that provides so little money to the service. When you look at cities like Eugene or Springfield, Eugene's providing a police service at over $8 per 1,000, and they're having a tough time. And then you look at the city of Springfield, it's over $7 per 1,000 assessed value that they're providing a police service. Also, not a huge, robust service. You're looking at us, we're providing a service that's comparative to the $1 or so, or $1.28 per 1,000 that people pay for property tax. So we're not providing much of a service. We're not getting much in taxes either. So you're getting kind of a comparative service. But when you look at a metro plan, one of the things that's really important is this geographical area. If the geographical area is huge, you want to put huge resources into it. If it's relatively small, you can kind of meld together and all of you maybe benefit. With us being so big, it's not a benefit to the City of Eugene and the City of Springfield. It would be very hard for them to provide services and recover any costs at all.
So what about the jail? Springfield doesn't seem to have the problems with its jail that the Sheriff's Department does. I know you get this question a lot. I hear it all the time.
Well, absolutely. One of the reasons is because they hold misdemeanor offenders, and only misdemeanor offenders. They only hold healthy males. Another huge factor. All of the other people, the felons, the females, the mentals, and the people with physical problems, or any other kind of issue comes to the Lane County Jail. So all the highest cost comes to the Lane County Jail because we have to provide the jail. And we're the only jail that houses felons. The other thing that you have to do when you house felons and you house federal prisoners, which we do both, you have to meet all the national jail standards. So you can't just say, I'm providing this jail. You have to provide it at a very standardized service. You're inspected, you have a number of things that you have to deal with every year. And if you don't, you can't hold them anymore. So it's a criteria that's very tough to meet. When you have a municipal jail, you don't have to meet those standards. And when you have a municipal jail that you don't hold felons, it's a moot subject because you just don't have to do it. So all the expensive people come to the Lane County Jail, and that is a cost that we have to bear. And that's a requirement by the state to provide a correctional facility. So that's difficult. That's difficult on the Sheriff's Office.
Alex Gardner, District Attorney, let's move over to you. So what does this proposed budget do to your department? Prosecutions?
It amounts to a cut of $2 million for me, and because we are so reliant on grant funding and federal funding and state money, and such a small proportion of our overall budget is carried by the local taxpayer directly, that means that most of the cut has to come from the criminal division or the medical examiner's office. So by eliminating the medical examiner's office, which is only about $385,000 a year, we leave in the neighborhood of about $1.6 million that has to come from the criminal division. When you start out with a system that is grossly underfunded, and then you take that big a chunk out of it, you're left with a system that's dysfunctional, and that's where we're going to be in a few days.
So how does a county not have a medical examiner? I mean, what do you do with the bodies, and how many are we talking here? And it's just...
The overall volume of unattended deaths to which we are paged is between 1,000 and 1,100 a year. We typically take jurisdiction of about 400 of those, which means more than a body a day that we have to do something with, and somewhere in the neighborhood of 50 or 60% of those are going to result in autopsies. We have a rental agreement with Peace Health that has provided a morgue of sorts, actually a pretty good one now at the new facility. We're going to lose that as well. And so the question of how is this going to look in 6 or 8 months is, all I can say is I don't know yet. We're working with senior law enforcement folks and fire service folks to try and cobble something together. But it basically distills to this. This is just one more critical government service for which we have no money. And so the bottom line is, when you can't get people to volunteer to perform all these critical services, you cobble together and do the best you can with whatever's left.
So you really don't know what it would look like, because we've never had this, a county without a medical examiner.
Nor can I find anywhere else in the United States that looks like this. A jurisdiction this size that has this service level in so many areas, I can't find another place that looks like this.
So prosecutors, how many would you lose under this proposed budget, and what does that mean to Joe Public?
Back in the comparatively rosy days in the late 70s, where we looked pretty much average compared to other jurisdictions this size in the United States, we had 32. Today we have 24 DAs left in the criminal division, and after the cuts are fully implemented, we'll have about 16. The office used to have 11 detective investigators back in the late 70s. We have 2 left in our criminal division. So you know, the difficulty, of course, is that every government is screaming for money, saying they don't have enough money. But show me another one where the cuts are on the order of 80% or 90%. I mean, Tom used to have, his operation used to have 99 deputies in the patrol division. Last year, 16, this year, 14, next year, I don't know, 6.
Now, I mean, part of the problem, we've talked about this before, part of the problem is a perception out there too, is there's been a lot of years when I was covering the news where we'd hear, okay, we're gonna have to shut this down, we're gonna have to close this down, it's drastic, it's terrible, everything, and then all of a sudden the money was found.
Right.
And so Lane County voters are kind of used to hearing the cry for wolf, and then all of a sudden somehow something happens. How do you get the message out that this isn't the year, this isn't crying wolf?
Well, one of the difficulties that they haven't had in previous years is that they didn't have a true cutoff of the federal money. That's what we're facing this year, or this next coming year. The other thing that's difficult with that is the county has operated on that for so long that it's very hard to determine, you know, where you're going with that.
So Alex, this is what I wanted to ask you. I saw an article in the paper the other day about you going to raise $900,000 through a plan to talk to the cities of Springfield and Eugene and start prosecuting some of those. How does that work?
It's actually, the number is wrong. It's actually more like $100,000 potentially for the city of Eugene, and something in the neighborhood of 220 or 30 with the city of Springfield. But basically it distills to this. DAs are overtime exempt. So if we give the city of Eugene more than they bargained for in terms of hours paid prosecuting, that still gives, and so they're maybe getting paid for 40 hours, doing 45 hours worth of work for the city of Eugene. I can still have them doing another 20 hours a week potentially for the county without additional compensation. So these are hardworking people who are committed to the work and really care about the community. They're willing to work more without getting paid, and these people are especially being undercompensated because, of course, they're losing all their benefits. But the total amount of money we're talking about changing hands, if we're successful in getting the Springfield contract, is more like $300,000. One other thing I wanted to mention, the whole rural schools renewal thing, the best case scenario now is $4.5 million. In the unlikely event that money materializes, it's $4.5 million against a $15 million deficit. So the feds nobody's even talking about the feds riding to the rescue this time.
Safety levy for both of you, is that even a possibility?
Well, the obvious need is, when you look at this, when you look at the way the budgets are set up and the way that we're set up in the discretionary general fund, you have to have a new revenue source. So the revenue source, there's only a couple of options for the way that works, and that's going to be some sort of levy. And the difficulty with that is, how do you do that? We've had a lot of failures in the past. We don't want to multiply that. And so how do you get the belief out there? Because like you said, there's a lot of distrust, there's a lot of past information, there's a lot of things that people are dealing with. We have to, oh yeah, and we have to show this demonstrated need, and I think we can, and then we go forward with the most concise, easy to understand method that we can go about it, because we can't do it without. If we continue to go the way that we're going, structurally we're set up where it'll just eventually disappear. It'll be worse, it's worse this next coming year, but it'll be bad the next year, and the next year, and the next year. Not as bad, but it'll be less and less services, and you're not providing an adequate service for this county.
Not as bad in terms of the size of the drop, but once you've gone from 99 to 5 or 6, you know, there's just not that much left to lose.
The numbers are lower just because the overall is lower.
And I know this concerns both of you, is crime statistics are going to get skewed because people who live in the country are not going to call you anymore, because we know that you're not going to be able to come.
Right. So apathy.
People aren't going to report crimes, which they should report them, but they're probably not going to. So it's going to look like things are getting better.
Well, and the other thing that's happening is that the felony crimes are being filed as misdemeanor offenses in a lot of the municipal courts. So if somebody's arrested, the officer arrests somebody with methamphetamine, instead of calling it possession of methamphetamine, which is what it is, which would bring the case to us, they're charging it as attempted methamphetamine possession, which is a misdemeanor, so that they can manage it in the municipal court. So the person ends up with a misdemeanor conviction, never gets into the felony system, and we never track it the way they're tracked everywhere else. So it'll look like things are better in Lane County when in fact they're actually worse.
All right, gentlemen, thank you both for being here.